Okay, so let's go to the book. And probably the problems from section 1.3 that I think probably might have given you a little bit of trouble or you weren't sure about was, for instance, you had 25 and 26, and possibly number 41. And then you also had number 42. Number 42, you're just explaining how you would do it. You don't actually have to work it out. So for this first one, I'll do 25. And so, or actually I'll do 26 because you could check 25 in the back of the book, or you could check all of these with my answer keys that are on Brightspace. And so I will work out number 26 first here. So we know that R is at 5, 1, and R is one of the endpoints because it's segment RS. We know M, they said M is the midpoint. So I know M is 1, 4, and so we need to find the other endpoint, S. And we did one like this on your homework, or I'm sorry, in your notes yesterday. Okay, so for this problem, number 26, and this is a time if you need to change it in your homework. I'm just going to draw this rough sketch of kind of what's going on. So I know that R is at 5, 1. The midpoint M is at 1, 4. And we don't know where S is, so I'm going to put X, Y for that. Now, since they give you the midpoint, please don't try and add 5 and 1, divide by 2, and 1 and 4, and divide by 2, because you're not finding this. Remember, that would give you the midpoint between these two guys, which would be somewhere in here. That's not what we want. And so we're going to use this midpoint so that we can find this. Now, some of you had mentioned a snowman method yesterday. That's fine as long as it's mathematically sound. So you would need to show me how you're using that so that I can see, what is your work. Otherwise, if you're not sure what that snowman method is, like me, then I'm going to show you kind of what I do, and then you can adapt as needed. And so remember, in the actual formula, you're supposed to take the two endpoints and add them. So 5 plus x and divide by 2. And then my y values, 1 plus y divided by 2. And this time, I know that it's supposed to equal the coordinates 1, 4. Okay? So then, let me change colors here. Now I need to set up two separate equations because I have two separate variables to solve for. Now I'm just matching the locations. So this represents the x values in this ordered pair, and this represents the x value in this ordered pair. So I'm going to take those two things, 5 plus x divided by 2, and I know that has to equal 1 in the midpoint. So I know when I add these two coordinates, these two x coordinates, and divide by 2, that gives me the x coordinate of the midpoint. Okay, and then my other equation is going to be the y stuff. So this represents the y values in this big ordered pair here, and this represents the y value in the midpoint. So now I'm going to do 1 plus y all divided by 2 has to equal that 4. Alright, so now I am just going to use algebra. So once you set that up, now we're just going to use algebra in order to solve. So remember we talked yesterday, how do we get rid of divide by 2? We multiply. So that cancels. Now you're left with 5 plus x equals 1 times 2, which is 2. Now you would minus 5. So then x equals negative 3. Okay. Then over here, do the same thing. Get rid of divide by 2. So multiply by 2 on both sides. So we get 1 plus y equals 8, minus 1, so y equals 7. So then s is at -3, 7. So that's -3, and that is now 7. Now you can check yourself. So now I'm going to take these two outside coordinates. So 5 plus -3 is 2, divided by 2, and I get 1. So that checks. Now the y values, 1 plus 7 is 8, divided by 2. Yep, that gives me 4. So I have the correct answer. Now this is different than my worked out solutions. I'm seeing now that I had an error. I had put -4 because I didn't multiply by 2 here. That was my mistake. So this is the actual answer, -3, 7. Okay, in 25 you would do very similarly. They give you this R, they give you the midpoint, but they don't give you this S. And so you would set it up very similarly. And that one you can check in the back of the book to make sure you get the right answer. All right, and then the other one I said I was going to go over, I think was number 41. So let's look at 41 here. This one was pretty straightforward on number 32, where we want to find the length of that. Now you would just use the distance formula. If you didn't get some of these finished because we didn't finish distance formula, that's okay. I'm not taking a grade on this one. But you will need to know it for the test. And we will have a big quiz for this chapter, and so you'll need it for that big quiz too. Let's see. What did I say? Let's do 41. So the endpoints of LF are at -2, 2, and 3, 1. The endpoints of segment JR are at 1 and -1, and R is at 2, -3. So what's the approximate difference in the lengths of the two segments? So again, in order to find the difference between the segments, you need to find the lengths of each of these segments. And then difference, remember, means what? Means subtraction. Okay? All right, so let's work that one out. So we have, let's do LF. And so I've got -2 minus 3 squared plus 2 minus 1 squared. So then that would be, what, that'd be -5 squared, and -5 squared is +25. 2 minus 1 would be 1, so 1 squared is 1. So that's about the square root of 26. And so this one, since there's decimals, you'll want to figure out what that is. Or actually, I'll just do that at the end so that I'm not rounding too much. So I'll leave it there for a minute. And then for JR, I'll do 1 minus 2 in parentheses squared plus -1 minus -3 squared, so that'd actually be -1 plus 3. So that's 1 minus 2 is -1, -1 squared is +1, -1 plus 3 is 2, so 2 squared is 4, so I have the square root of 5. So now I'll do the difference, so just type this in, square root of 26 minus the square root of 5, and I got approximately 2.86, which I think is letter B. Okay, so again, for the quiz today, you'll get to use your notes and be able to have those formulas so that you don't have them memorized yet, but you will need to have them memorized for the test. Okay, and then on number 42, it's asking, you've got this segment, and it says that P is at -2, 4, The M, the midpoint is at 1, 0. And then we don't know what Q is. Okay, so you've got segment PQ with the midpoint M. And they asked you to figure out or explain. You don't even have to do the work, like the mathematical work. They just want you to explain how do you get the length of PQ. So in my answer key, I said there's two ways. So one way would be to use the distance formula to find this length. And then since this is the midpoint, we could just double that. Okay, so that'd be one way. Option one is that you would find the length between P and M. And since M's the midpoint, you would just have to double that to get the whole length PQ. That's the shorter way. That's option one. Now you could have also written, you need to use the midpoint formula to find point Q. And then once you find point Q, then use point Q and point P and plug them into the distance formula to find the length of PQ. So you've got two different ways that you could have explained. They didn't tell you you had to work it out. They just said explain how you would find the length of PQ given this information. So option one, use distance to find the length from P to M and then double it. Or option two, use midpoint formula first to find Q and then use points Q and P to find to do the distance formula to find the length from P to Q. I'm not going to write all that out. You can write it out, what it is. Because on the test, there will be some things where you will have to explain. It's not just some writing out mathematical stuff like this. There are some things where you have to apply vocabulary and things that you know about it in order to write an explanation about what's happening. Okay. All right, so that concludes homework help. So go ahead and put your homework away, file it away in the section that it goes in your binder. And then now you're going to keep out your notes. So open your notes to section 1.3, and the sub's going to pass out the 1.3 quiz. And so you can use your notes for that quiz, okay? Once you're done with the quiz, flip it over to the blank side so that the sub knows that you're finished. And then you can write down the essential questions and topic and get your Cornell notes ready for section 1.4 day 1, because we're going to split section 1.4 into 2 sections. Okay?